in this devlog, we're going to go all the way from version 4.0 all the way up to what will be version 4.5 in the next few days. So instead of starting from the bottom and working our way up, in this case, we're going to start from the top and work our way down because the more interesting stuff is going to be up here. Now, starting with the first section, as you can see, a lot of this stuff pertains to specifically, actually zoom a bit, the speed of sound. So basically delayed sound effects. So what I mean by that is, well, I implemented easy control of the speed of sound. If I can minimize this properly and go to that window. There we go. So as you can see, there's my other client. Let me go ahead and study my aim. He is roughly, I think it's a little over 500 meters, give or take a little bit. And what's going to happen is when I shoot on this client, there will be a delay, speed of sound from when the client hears a shot. So if I shoot on the server, you'll hear it instantly. Client will hear it later. Just like so. Now, same thing goes for impacts. So this is set up to basically override play sound at location. So now you have the option to play the sound at a location with the sound delay. And I also implemented this to work with the default physical material effects. So that all works the same. And you also have an option now to play, basically have the speed of sound involved. So when I shoot this target, what you'll hear is the gunshot go off immediately on the server. Then on the client on the left-hand side, you'll hear the projectile hit the target pretty much instantly. Then you'll hear the gunshot of the server on the client. And then finally, you'll hear the projectile impact the target on the server last because we are the farthest away. So when I shoot, I'm a little low. There you can hear the delay. So I'll go ahead and pop this one. So you can hear that delay there. And it'll probably help you a little bit. If I go ahead and just do it on one client. So I fire. You can hear the speed of sound taking effect. Like so. So that really kind of wraps that up. I'll go ahead and cover real quickly how they're actually used. So just like with play sound at location, the default one, we also have a new node or a function called play sound delayed. So what this does, obviously, it takes in the world actor. That can be literally any actor. It takes in the location of where you want the sound to be played from, the sound, and then the volume and pitch multiplier. This is optional, but that's really all it takes in, and you have the speed of sound. It was meant to be set up simply. Now moving on to the actual impact effects. So this got a complete overhaul. So now we have two simple functions: spawn impact effect sound delayed and spawn impact effect. This one will not have any sort of speed of sound effect applied to the sound. It's just instant. And this one obviously does. Now these take in two new structures. So one for sound settings, which is the sound, volume, and pitch modifiers. Then we have the effect settings, which is basically the impact effects, so the Niagara particles or the cascade particles, the decal to be applied, how you want to handle the pulling of said particles, and so on, so on. So you can really kind of tune those how you want and fill them out manually, or you can go and if you're using my physical materials, do things. So here you can see I'm getting my projectile impact effects. I can also get like my footstep impact effects and plug those right in instead. And now I'm playing whatever settings I have for the footsteps instead of the actual projectile impacts, which you can see over here for the steel target. Here is my steel target. So I have this little spark effect kind of playing, no decals or anything like that. And then I have my steel target sound to basically play. Now this does have some optimizations built into it. So for example, if you're within like a close range, you will not have any delay. So if you're within a range that is not going to be noticeable, there's no sound delay that's going to be played. So that's kind of just a benefit of if you have like 10 guys together, for example, and you're all just spraying full auto into the woods for whatever reason, none of you are going to have any sort of delayed sound because you're so close together. It doesn't matter. Gameplay is not going to benefit anything. So just small optimizations there. So I added an interface. This is kind of more, I guess you say, one of those optional things. So I added to the steel target and the example hole target. So as you saw in the projectile, I call this on hit, which is part of the FPS template hit interface that's on the actor. And here's the on hit. All you got to do is just add the interface and override this, and it'll fire. So here I added it to my whole target. So instead of having a dedicated function and doing a bunch of casting, I just added it right to it. So now I have two. So here's the steel target. Basically, I play an animation when it's hit, and then have a delay for it to be reset. Very, very simple. Again, that's more of just one of those optional things. And then I started to overhaul the map. Golly, I'm tired of looking at his teeth. So basically, the whole kind of level got an overhaul. It's still a work in progress, but I figured it could just use a simple cleanup to look a lot nicer and have a more, I guess you could say, traversed area to tinker with stuff. So here you have the long range, then you have the shoot house. Might add some other stuff. I don't really know yet, but it's, again, just a work in progress. So next up, here we have a lot of the kind of procedural stuff that is to make things a little bit nicer. So starting from the top here, we have a shake curve that allows you to be, well, basically play a little bit of shake with your firearm. So this is kind of like one of those good things that you can see here for shaving a shake when going from the high to low ready to normal to give it just kind of a little layer of immersion. So here I'm at the high ready. When I aim, you will see I get a little shake. So here I hold it right on this little nut there, aim. You can see there's a little bit of a shake as he goes to settle the gun back down. So that is something that is just set up right in here under the animation tab. We have the shake curve, we have the shake curve duration, then we have the shake curve speed. I do not know why it's not up there. I need to make sure to move that. But the duration is basically how long the shake will be played for, and then the speed is how fast it will shake. So if I set this to something like 1 and this to something like 8, what you'll see is this very slow, sluggish shake. And if I revert that back to 8, you can see it shook the gun for a decent bit of, I don't know, however long it was. So that's really kind of what that all controls. So there's the two options that I just showed you. And here we have the recoil. So the recoil system got a complete overhaul. We're no longer using just straight randomized values. You still have the option to do things like, let me show you right here, like adding a multiplier so you can recoil more or less. But the main thing is it is now graph controlled. So we have two graphs, one's for the location, one's for the rotation. So the location, let me open up both of these. Location is the movement. So here, the green line is basically back into your shoulder. So the farther down this goes, the more the gun's going to come back towards your camera or quote unquote shoulder. And then this little blue line here, that's going to be your up and down. Then the red is going to be left to right. I don't want to tinker with the red, so I leave it. We have the rotation. So how does it affect the rotation? Well, starting with the red, this is going to be your pitch. So this is going to be your up and down. So basically, the farther down, the more the muzzle is going to come up. So this allows for a lot more control. So if you're familiar with Modern Warfare, how they kind of have their recoil set up when you shoot and the muzzle comes back down, it has a tendency to sometimes overcompensate. So it goes down past center, and then it'll come back up to kind of recenter itself, so to speak. So that's what this is set up to do. So the recoil muzzle comes up, muzzle starts to go back down, muzzle goes down below 0, and then it comes back up to be settled. So that's how all that kind of gets controlled there through the graph. And then you have things like this one. So this would be, I cannot actually remember. I believe this is the rotation and green is the roll, but I could be wrong. Then we have these randomization values. So we have min and max for all these. So the min and max is obviously the min and max. So here we have the pitch. So as the muzzle comes up and down, what this is going to do is it's not a negative value. They're both positive. It's going to allow it to come kind of like a little bit of a random place each time for vertical movement. Then we have the roll as a negative and a positive. That is so it can roll and rotate for the yaw left and right, not just on one side. So as you can see here, it's a little bit different with each shot. Now, if you want to do something like make it favor one side, what you do is you just change one of these values. So I'll set this max value to the yaw to 0, and that'll make it so I only go to the right. That's really not quite enough to tell, so I'll just change this to like -7 for the max. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. But you can see the gun moves to the, or rotates to the right. And it does not go to the left at all. So that's how you kind of tweak that. So you get a ton more control than you did before. This is still attachment based. So for example, here I'll shoot. Actually, I'll do full auto. So there's that. Go add a grip and a suppressor. As you can see, it is now a lot more controllable with the attachments. So that all still works the same. Set up so this is for firearm customization. So this is just kind of help. So for example, let me drag my optic all the way forwards. Now the way this worked before was when I would replace this, what it would do, it would reset it back. So now when I replace it, it stays at the position that I moved it to. So that was just one of those convenience things that I went ahead and added. Improve the shooting sounds a bit. So now we have, in my opinion, better unsuppressed sounds. Then we also have some suppressed sounds, which in my opinion might sound a little bit worse than before. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I tried to give it the sound of kind of like a lot of gas coming back, but I don't think I captured that very well. But anyways, moving on, fixed a couple bugs. So this is in regards to camera settings. So now each gun has a new set of controls. So if we head over to default, even the firearm has an option for camera settings. So we have the camera field of zoom, speed, distance, and the option to use a fixed camera distance, which I will cover later as that is an earlier feature. But these are now on the gun as well as every single optic, and this is all using the aim interface. So I'll cover the aim interface later as well. But anyways, move the aim. Actually, I guess I'm gonna have to cover it. So we'll come back to it. Adjusted the high port and the low port to kind of match more of that of what I liked in ground branch, which I also changed the controls of. So now if you scroll up without aiming, your gun goes to high ready, go down, it goes to normal, go to low ready, so on and so on. If you aim and you scroll in, you zoom in, you scroll back, you zoom out. So that's just a little bit of control change. Optimize the firearm a little bit more. Here's the curve-based recoil, and so on and so on. So yes, started working on a basic free look. I hope I still have this set up, which I do. So you hold Alt, you have just basically some basic free look. So I can aim and look around and all that kind of stuff. And it's just there. Hate looking at that guy's mouth all the time. Okay. Added a function to the part-based class to get the mesh component. Just these are basically a lot of helpers. So this is one that is kind of useful. So to the init function of your character. So basically anytime you want to use the part component, so somewhere up in here, the init, we now have an option for auto attach. So this is to auto attach your camera. If this is unchecked, your camera will not do anything. This is for if you want to manually attach your camera to something, have that ability to do so. Like if you want to attach your camera to a spring arm component and have your spring arm component attached to your head bone, that is now possible. So stripped out everything from the C++ example character. So that is the case. Like literally everything is now in Blueprint for this. One of the things I want to go ahead and mention as well, we now have a custom character movement component. And this has a lot of options for basically sprinting. So you have standing sprinting and crouch sprinting options. So you can control the sprint speed while standing, crouch sprint speed, the option to sprint while crouched, can only crouch sprint forwards, have the option to crouch sprint sideways and backwards, change the speed for sideways and backward sprinting, same thing for standing. So a lot of basically every control you could possibly need there. So here's the camera settings structure. So basically what this controls is, as you can read right here. So I'll cover them really quick. So we are using the, let's see, the ATAR or ATACR, and let's go to the camera settings, which is right here. So here we have the camera field of view zoom, speed, distance, and the option to use a fixed camera distance. I don't know why that's not unchecked. I thought that would be checked. But to sum it up, let's start with the bottom. So use fixed camera distance. So when I have that checked and I aim, this is basically how far I am from the optic. So you can see the charging handle there at the bottom. And now if I slide it forwards and I aim, I am still the same distance behind it, even though it is much farther up on the gun. If I uncheck this, here I am aiming. I'm a little bit farther back than I was before, but if I slide it all the way forwards, now it is really far forwards and my camera has not followed it to meet it. So this is very useful for magnified optics. Next up is the camera field or the camera distance. So if we want it to be farther away, let me set this to 15. And again, remember, this is checked, so it's a fixed position. Now, as you can see, I'm sucked into it. I went the wrong direction. Negative 15. You can see it is now very far away. Same thing for camera field of view speed. So if I set this to like 50, watch my camera zoom. It's very snappy. And then lastly, the amount. So if I go to like 35 for the field of zoom, now my camera zooms in a lot when I go to actually aim in. So that's really what those are set up to control. And again, this is now on the firearm as well, so you have those same options on the firearm, even if you don't have an optic. So here's all the spawning particle effects, along with the physical material, and added an example for footsteps. So that is something else that I went ahead and started working on, just to kind of give you an example. So here if I go to the lower body, same thing on the third person. Basically what I'm doing is on an animation notify, so each step, I am performing a line trace going straight down. I am getting my physical material, and I am basically getting the footstep particle effects. So that would be this. So what I showed you previously. Then I call spawn impact effect, just like before, and I showed you the sound and the sound delay and all that. The difference is I'm just plugging it in, and I am not plugging in a multiplier from here. Instead, I make my own. So I'm using basically my forward velocity, which is calculated right here. So the forward vector and your movement gets you forward velocity. Use that to scale basically the sound. So you're going between a multiplier of 0 and 1. So if you're sprinting, you're making more noise. And if you're walking, you're making less. So it allows you to scale how loudness of the sounds basically based upon how fast you're moving. So I figured that would be one of those things that are quite useful to have set up, and there's just an example on how you can go ahead and use it. And again, it works based upon the physical material class, so any service you want to have, it'll just work. I remove the magazine class and basically replace that in the firearm with a simple static mesh component. As you can see here in begin play, that's all it is now. Was no need to have that class there. It was just kind of more, like I say here, it was mostly just a waste of space. Remove the projectile spawn and the component ID. Those were never really used as well. And again, you can see it's for the same reasons as the above. Waste of space. And that was in regard to actual submission. Rename some functions. So here I started tinkering around with some different, functions. Or let me rephrase that, different blueprint style functions that are made in C++. So here I made my own node. Is locally controlled that has 2 execution pins. So if you're not locally controlled, you have this false that runs. If you are, you have this true. I also have stuff for like is aiming. So if we head over to this guy right here, here's my is aiming function. If we're aiming, true will fire. If we're not, false will fire. So I thought this was kind of cool. It allowed you to almost get the blueprint macro effect through C++ functions. So they're like blueprint macros, but they're not actually macros. Like, hopefully you get the idea. So actually, ironically enough, you can see all that kind of stuff. fixed a very annoying issue with the left hand IK that has been here basically since the beginning of this plugin. So the left hand used to have jitter in certain positions, like when I would rotate around or lean or move and all that kind of stuff. The left hand would sometimes have a little bit of a jitter, like would snap back, especially when it came down to like different vertical grips. And it was just one of those things that was really annoying. But now that no longer happens. So now it is locked in and it's just butterly smooth. Buttery smooth. Words are fun. Exposed a beat's aiming variable to the animation blueprint to use in the head rotation for third person and true first person. This kind of makes it a little bit easier to set up. As well as, I don't see it in here, but the entire animation graph is now using Fastpass. So everything is using Fastpass. Nothing is blocking it. So it should be a little more performant. Well, by default. Okay, moving on. This is just more bug fixes. All that you can see here. Optimize animation graph to use Fastpass. Beefed up the default recoil. This has been overhauled, so it doesn't matter anymore. Here's some stuff in regards to the character movement component, and here I mentioned the crosshair. So I made a crosshair as well that is just one of those optional things that's in here. Did the character, firearm. Crap, let me find it. All right, found it. It's in miscellaneous, crosshair, and here's the widget. So this is actually a C++ driven widget, but you have a lot of control over it. So basically, here's my crosshair on the screen. You have all these test controls here. So here's my test velocity as it increases. So this is like your movement speed. You want to set your max velocity to your max movement speed, by the way. You can see it simulated right here in the window and all that fun stuff. It doesn't work all the time. Sometimes you have to compile for it to get the result. But to kind of show you how it works, I'll go ahead and actually set it up in the character. All right. Very simple. Just create a widget, add a viewport, and pass in yourself to the owning pawn. Hit play. Here's your crosshair. Say it scales up by movement speed. Add a ring around if you want to use that. And really, all these kind of things are optional. Like, you don't need this ring if you don't want it. Now you just have the four corners, and they all work the exact same. And you have all these controls with it. So you can control the circle size, the max offset, how many times the crosshair actually updates per second. This is more of a performance thing, even though it's extremely lightweight to begin with. You can update it from outside sources. This is actually made a video on this. And the interpolation rate, so how fast it scales up and scales down based upon your speed. So how smooth and, I guess you could say, slow and sluggish it's going to be. So that's what that controls there for the crosshair. Here we have some, this was kind of more one of those weird things that I didn't notice until I tried it in another project with someone else's crosshair in it. And basically the center had this circle area that was causing some weird distortion when you were around. It was really odd, but anyways, that ended up getting fixed, as well as it performance or the decreased the shader complexity, so it's a little more performant, and made the reticle look sharper. So instead of having any sort of blur, it kind of sharpened it up a little bit. And here's stuff related to the inventory, which is no longer a concern. And here's it was a big one. So I drastically increased the render target scope performance. Let me see if I have the screenshots here that I can show you. All right, so here I have some example screenshots that I took out of another project for this test. So basically here I'm at, let me actually show you the default. So when the scope's not running at all, we're at 360 FPS. 260 FPS. Now, here is the unoptimized. So this is really, it has some things done for performance, but basically the majority of the optimizations that I did are disabled. So this is like not the worst case scenario, but this is kind of like the average stuff that you would get from other places on the marketplace that don't have really any of the optimizations that I've introduced into it. So as you can see, we went from 260 all the way down to 180, and we increased to 5.53 from 3.84 milliseconds for the frame time. And that was pretty consistent. Here I looked up a little bit, and we lost a half or one whole frame per second. Only a difference within margin of error. Then with my optimizations, We went up to 247, and aiming at that high part, 243. So really increased by a good chunk right there alone. And that's on top of the current optimizations that I already did. So that just added another layer on top of that. So frame rate for render targets is now really not a concern because it's basically now I have, well, simply put, this plugin has the lightest render target scopes, period. There's none on the marketplace that can beat them. And that was really a big proponent of it because that is something that I really like in video games, and I hope that is something that soon, anyways, becomes kind of more a standard feature now that hardware is getting more and more powerful and the low end stuff can actually drive it. But, anyways, low end hardware should have no problem at all running these. All right, there's to the crosshair inventory, and here's a lot of the stuff in regards to the component inventory, more stuff that doesn't really matter, and 4.2. So fix some compiling and random bugs. Well, let me just go ahead and scroll through here and see if there's anything interesting. Okay, so I actually started working on night vision. So let me go ahead and try to show you how that is set up. All right, so I finally found it. Basically, it's just a strong post process. So all you're doing here, just have custom post process material that's already set up, and I'm just enabling it and disabling it. So when I press H, it's a little bit bright outside, but indoors, this is where it's a lot better. Let me show you on the night map. All right, so we're on the night map, press H, and we now have a lot more visibility. So I can add the IR flashlight, which here's with no night vision, no flashlight, here's with night vision. It just illuminates it a good bit. And now the laser, press H, it is completely invisible. It is only actually visible through the process. So here's no night vision. You just cannot see anything. It's with night vision. So really it's just a lot easier to go through and actually see just everything. And in my opinion, it looks a little bit better compared to the previous. But granted, the previous night vision, all that was through the magnifiers that I turned into basically a night vision monocle. So, yeah. Alrighty, so I'm glad I actually checked this because I didn't realize, well, I realized that my thermals broke when I did the performance update. But anyways, I went ahead and fixed that. And moving back on, I now have proper thermals. So they work just like they do in real life. So by reference, here's my plane of glass. And here's my character. So let me go ahead and throw on a thermal. So when I aim, I can see my guy just fine, he glows up. However, here's my plane of glass. So just like real life, thermals cannot see through glass. It's just going to completely block it because heat, well, obviously the heat's not going through it. That's all done simply by just setting the depth stencil value to something greater than 0, such as 1, and using my glass shader that I went ahead and set up. So this is for basically world objects. So you can just set it to one of them and set the depth that stencil value, and you're good to go. Thermals can no longer look through it, while everything else sees it, just like normal glass. Fixed a potential issue that some people, I don't remember if someone actually had this or not, but this is a safety check. So now instead of getting the character component directly, we have a function called GetCharacterComponent. So basically, if you call this and character component's invalid, instead of just returning something invalid, it will attempt to re-get it and then return it. So it'll at some point correct itself in case it's actually incorrect. Went ahead and improved some of the stuff in regards to actually converting from a transform to my custom projectile transform structure. Again, was basically like a big optimization for sending or projectile transform, like your muzzle transform, over via RPCs. All in all, it reduced it by about 3 and, or I think it was like 3.4 times less. You know, I cannot think of what the word is. Less data being sent, so about 3.4 times less data being sent compared to the normal F transform. Made some map editor changes, just kind of some fixes in regards to transforms. So that's now been moved into the project as well. All this kind of stuff over to the AIM interface, and I'll cover that here in a second, and that pretty much sums it up. So, what is the AIM interface? That is something that is now actually new. So, for example, we head over to actually, I have an example right here in my miscellaneous. So, here's my held hollow site. All it is the FPS template site base. It's nothing fancy. It, as you can see, has some options here. But here's where it kind of gets, I guess you could say, a little bit more interesting. Let me head over to my character and I'll show you what I mean. So, let me unspawn a firearm so it doesn't actually show up. And I have it over here. So when I press 3, we spawn held ATRC. So basically, this is just the held scope. Nothing fancy. But this all works in the same manner. So I press 3, I am now holding a scope, and it works. The aim and all that is done procedurally. You can still zoom in, all that kind of stuff. I already set up the rangefinder. I'll show you that here in a second. But basically, anything that you can hold, you're going to hold. So I press 3. I'm now using this hollow site. And if I really want to, I haven't actually tested it. Let's see. What would that be? Let me show you how to set one of those up really. So inside of, I'll grab this reflex site. That might already be set up, so I'll grab the reflex site to use that. Press 3, and I'm now aiming reflex site. So it kind of just works all in the same manner. Let me set that 3 or 4. Might have been 4. Yeah, so 4. Now we're using the reflex site. And I didn't have to really change anything. That's because I've set it up to use the animation interface, or the AIM interface. So the AIM interface, let me go ahead and head over to it, is just a series of functions that are used for all the procedural stuff. So for example, my site class inherits this AIM interface, and it returns all the information that this actually needs to basically function. So if you wanted to make it so you could pick up anything extra of an actor that you made, you just make it inherit from this interface and pretty much turn all the info that you would need. It's actually, even though there seems like there's a lot here, it's very simple. A lot of the stuff is just simply returning floats or integers. Those are self-explanatory. They're right in the actual, in my site base class. You can see exactly what all you need to get them to work. But in turn, that allows for things to basically work, such as this rangefinder. So here I have a rangefinder class, little mouse. So I know, actually I could use this to range targets. So this is 428 meters away. So it's not quite 500. I really thought it was 500. But you got sway and all that kind of stuff. This guy's too close to register. This wall is 9.7. That corner is 30. So on and so on. So on the subject of the rangefinder, let's go ahead and look at it, because this will be the last thing I do, because it is getting late and I am supposed to go to bed about an hour and a half ago. But this video is going on 33 minutes and I recorded it twice. I kept screwing it up. So it has everything that basically your scope would have and your optic would have, so you can choose and tweak all this stuff. But the interesting stuff is in the rangefinder. So here we have the laser socket. So this is basically where your laser would be projected out of to register. Here we have a max distance and a min distance. So basically I can't register anything closer than 8 meters. So if I aim and click, I can't do it. If I back up, still can't, and there we go. So now I can get it there, right to 8. So it has a minimum range of 8 meters. Same thing, you have a max distance as well. Moving on from there, we have some other options. So we'll start with unit types. So right now we're on metric. If I go to imperial, we are going to be in terms of yards. So this target is 468.7 yards away. You will see that it also changed the ending. So that had Y at the end. So for example, 13.6Y, if I change this back to metric, we're at 12.0 M. So we go to meters. So we have the append unit type. So now we just have just the value. Don't have the Y or the M, and we also have use uppers. So this will be upper or lowercase. So this is lowercase m, just basically to allow you to tweak the visuals to kind of get more or less the result that you want. So it's just very simple. I saw Tarkov implemented in their latest update, and I basically went ahead and made one like 2 days after I saw it in the trailer. So now we have a rangefinder. So have at it. And that pretty much sums up everything. So we got a pretty solid list going of changes. A lot of them are just more so, you could say, visual pleasers. Oh yeah, one key thing that has been changed, like was a big fix that has been plaguing start. This section here, force head straight. So previously in the past, basically, if you wanted to use marketplace animations and they had the head turned, like, let me actually see if I have one of those. All right, so I went ahead and just made an animation. So here you can kind of get an idea. So here's the completely straight one, and here's the one with the rotated head. So what the problem was, if you were to try to use one of those animations that had a rotated head, what would happen? And of course, I'm not actually using the firearm. There we go. So see now, I aim, and it's all correct, even though my head's rotated. Let me show you what would happen without that. Okay, so I disconnected that graph, and when I aim, it's now offset because my head is turned slightly to the right and down. So that's where my optic is going to go. It's basically going to follow that. So that is one of those things that really just fixes it. And I had a previous, I guess you could call this an attempted fix, which would be, let me re-add it. I thought I had it in here. All right, here we go. So as you can see, the head is now straight. However, watch it when I disconnect it. So here's the normal pose. Watch the arms, the head slightly at an angle, and when I connect it back up, you can see it moves the hands over. So now when we play, as you can see, yeah, we're aiming and it's directly straight, but the actual head position itself, not the head position, it had moved the pose over and basically broke it. So that's just due to the animation instance and the anim graph pretty much running separately. So if they were running, I guess you could say conjoined, to where I would receive this fix, that wouldn't, have any problem, but unfortunately it's just one of those things. So that's why we now have this little graph here. Put it back. There it is. I'm actually kind of curious. So when you actually connect these two together, the head, as you can see, is still straight, but it also allows you to do things like have this to where you can lean, or I guess you could say sidestep out, kind of like how you can in ground branch, but that's not really something that's needed. So anyways, we now have this fix, and it's good to go. So anyways, that pretty much, I don't know why I just closed that because I got that animation. That pretty much wraps up nearly everything that has been done. It's a lot of fine tuning, tweaking, and just general improvements to the already existing systems, as well as, and I just realized I completely forgot one, as well as just a couple other things to really kind of help it along. So I guess you could say polishing it up. So lastly, we now have a couple different things. So we have the first person base pose offset and the third person base pose offset. So these both do the same thing, just for one's for third person, one's for first person. So here's my base pose right here. This is where my gun is. And now you have the ability to modify that. So if I bump this up to 10 on the Z and I hit play, see the gun is now really high. Let's say I want to bring it to the left. So I'll modify the X. I'll go 10 on the X. I went the wrong direction. Negative X to bring it left. So negative 10. Now it's nearly straight. Now let's say I want to bring it down. So I'll go down to like 5. Go left, or a little bit less. So we'll go down to like negative 5. And we'll go, let's say we'll go farther forwards. We'll go forwards by 5 as well. So now we have it out here. And again, this all is overlaid and works just like normal. So everything works in the same manner. So that pretty much sums up everything. So Big devlog, big update. I'll see you in the next video.